Hello and welcome to The Menu, Monocle Radio's food and drink programme. I'm your host, Chiara Rimella. Coming up, we sample a morsel of Bahrain's mouthwatering cuisine.
Middle Eastern food is amazing and it's beautiful, but it's so diverse, it's so colourful, it's so rich in history, and I wish more people would know that. Also on the programme, we visit a classic diner in New York City.
It's not me, these are the words of other people, that there is an energy and a vibe that is living in this space, and that's what it is.
Plus, we get a taste of Finland's heritage ale. All that here on The Menu on Monocle Radio. When it comes to Middle Eastern cuisine, Bahrain may not jump to mind as the most famous gastronomic destination, but this island nation has a multi-layered culinary tradition that has nothing to envy its more well-known neighbours. Author Noor Murad grew up in the Gulf country, later moving to London and eventually joining renowned chef Jota Motolengi's Test Kitchen and contributing to its best-selling cookbooks. But when it came to writing her own recipe title, she decided to delve into the memories of her upbringing for an ode to the ingredients and specialties of her homeland. From a love letter to black limes to generous rice dishes, her book, Lugma, is a bountiful collection that's all about the joy of sharing food and engineering the perfect bite. Noor joined me in the studio to tell me more about what went into her writing. I started by asking her what the word Lugma means.
Lugma in Arabic means a bite. And, back home, especially in Bahrain, it's quite common to eat with your hands. And it's quite an intimate thing for some, like your loved ones or your family or your friends to do, is to make you a bite of food off of their plates. So even if they got tore off a piece of pita and stuffed it with some dip or some hot sauce or whatever and then hand it to you. And I would say that's the ultimate form of love. If someone feeds you something off their plate, it is like them feeding you something from their heart. And I just thought it was a really good name for a book because it is such a personal book and it's full of delicious bites of things.
Well, speaking of that sense of love, and again, we haven't even made it past the cover of the book at this point, but I am looking at it because it is a word that I bring up in the studio a lot, which is this idea of abundance with people who cook from lots of different traditions. But I feel like in the context of Bahrain, the Middle East, this word means something even extra. What does the idea of abundance mean to you? Because the book is called Abundant Dishes and Stories from My Middle East.
Yeah, so it was interesting. It actually took a little while to come up with that. There's a title and then there's kind of a little catchphrase on cookbooks. You could think it's just a typical thing is recipes and stories or delicious or something. And I was like, the thing about food, especially my food, is that there isn't much ego there. It's quite rustic, it's quite homey. But the one thing with Middle Eastern food in particular is that it's very generous and it's abundant, as in there's just so much of it. And you go to anyone's house and they're just there to feed you. And that really, the word abundance really shouts that. It really depicts that kind of Middle Eastern hospitality. And it's also a book that is giving. It's giving a lot of information, it's giving a lot of recipes, it's giving a lot of food, and I really wanted to capture that, and I think the word abundance does it pretty well.
Yeah, I can confirm that.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive in. One of the things that really jumped out at me from the beginning is your absolute devotion and clear kind of honest passion to rice. There is a whole chapter dedicated to it, but what does it mean to love rice in the context of your cooking and in the context of the cuisine that you're trying to represent?
Well, I say that rice is the most superior carb, and I know that I'm in a potato-loving nation. Potato and bread.
Controversial.
Yeah, it is quite a controversial statement, I feel. But, there's also some recipes in there with rice with potatoes, so that is, double carb. Yeah, rice isn't native to Bahrain. We don't have the kind of fertile land to have those kind of rice fields and stuff like that. It's a desert in the end. But rice arrived through trade and it just kind of took the island by storm, and it quickly became the favorite carb. So every meal that Bahrainis will sit down to, lunch is usually the main meal, there's always a rice element, whether that's a grand rice dish with loads of spices and fish or meat, or if it's just a side rice dish. Or if it's like madroba, which is like a rice porridge thing, there's always rice, and people will be very disappointed if there is not. And I just love it so much. And I think when I moved to the UK, I started cooking a lot more rice dishes just because you kind of do more things that remind you of home when you leave. And I really felt like, okay, I want to dedicate a whole chapter to this most versatile grain that can be dressed up or dressed down. It's so inviting, it's so humble, it's so accessible, and there's just so much you can do to it. So yeah, I limited it to like, I think it's like 10 or 11 rice dishes in there, but I could have gone on.
I mean, that's Lugma part 2, sure. You hinted there at some of the realities of Bahrain's territory and its landscape. Mm-hmm. But you write really interestingly about the specificity of the cuisine in the book. And I think it's really interesting. You know, you chose to sort of refer to the Middle East on the cover. But one of the aims, it seems to me, of your introduction is really to set out how different everything can be in the region. What are the peculiarities of Bahraini cuisine? And why is it not like the sort of Levantine Middle Eastern cuisine that we frequently reach to when we hear the words?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I set out to do with this book. I think like Middle Eastern food is amazing and it's beautiful, but it's so diverse, it's so colorful, it's so rich in history. And I wish more people would know that. So I grew up in Bahrain, which is this tiny island in the Persian Gulf. It's so small, like if you looked on a world map, you'd probably miss it. But throughout history, it used to be like an important center of trade and a very important seaport. So a lot of different influences kind of came through, a lot of different cultures passed by, and Bahrain kind of took on those cultures. So I always say the 3 dominant flavors in Bahraini food is Arabic, Persian, and Indian kind of mixed into one to make this like very unique, punchy cuisine, like big, grand, glorious rice dishes, loads of herbs, black limes, like sour flavors, but then loads of spices, very spice heavy. There's always something, hot sauce of some kind or a hot pickle on the side of things, and which is not something that people often think about when they think of Middle Eastern food. I always say that like the typical hard hitters like falafel and hummus and shakshuka and all those things, like they are amazing as they are, but they have a very good PR team. And I think people just like really gravitate towards them. So I don't need to add to that. My aim was to like big up some other foods and kind of push those forward and just say like in the word abundant, like there's more, there's always more.
You mentioned black limes there, which I think make up so much of a backbone of what you describe as the flavors at the heart of this book. Can you tell us about black limes, and also what are the defining flavors that you carried with you kind of in the suitcase of memories when you came to London? Because as an immigrant myself, I know that there are certain things that perhaps might not be the most obvious to an external onlooker, but that really just form that connection to back home. And so what were those flavors for you, and how are they represented in the book?
So obviously, yes, black limes, I'll start with that. They are a super important ingredient in Bahrain, but also in the Gulf in its entirety and in Iran and Iraq. And, you know, I think they're kind of having a moment these days. I kind of included lots of recipes when I was working at Telengi, and then all of a sudden other chefs kind of started to take notice, and they're kind of like making it into the Western mainstream. But I always I'm like, but they're not really a fad. They've been around for so long, and they are like, I really feel like a bit of like my identity. So black limes are literally just a type of lime. Middle Eastern limes, or they're a bit smaller, called lumi, and they dry them out in the sun until they're completely hollow. And, you know, when you touch them, they're just rock hard. And there's 2 types. There's like the dried greeny, like they're kind of like greeny gray ones, yellowy, or there's the black ones. The only difference is that the black ones have been heat treated to give them that like black dramatic appearance. But they can be used interchangeably in cooking. They both have this like really earthy, intense, bitter flavor, and you drop it into stews, into rice dishes. You can grind it up and use it in marinades. You can use it in tea. I've put it in desserts. Like, there's so many ways you can use it. It's so versatile, but you just kind of have to know like what to pair it with, because on its own, it is quite an intense flavor. So yeah, that's black limes. And do you know what? I know you can still get them here, but every time I come to Bahrain, there's always like a kilo of black limes in my suitcase. Yeah, black limes. I mean, there's something very different about like sourcing it from the land you grew up in, even though like, for example, dates, I know I can get them in the UK, but I can't get the varieties that I want in the UK. Like Majdoul dates are like super popular, and for good reason. They're like caramelly and chewy and delicious. But then there's just so many varieties that I grew up with that are different to that. So I'll always bring dates, usually ones that my dad has harvested. And different like hot sauces and condiments, things that I just really, really love and find hard to get here.
There's also a really lovely sort of love letter to your mom in the book and her love for pancakes. Yeah. And I find it really striking that you talk about the fact that she made the journey sort of the other way around. She went from the UK into Bahrain, and then eventually you left and came here. I wonder, because this is your Middle East, how much of the Britain that you kind of were fed through her as a child, and then the Britain that you found on the other end of this equation has also fed into this, your Middle East.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because like obviously I've always grown up half English. My mom moved to Bahrain when she was like 21. She's lived there for over 40 years. Like she's, you know, I always say like an honorary Bahraini, but she did cling on to her Britishness quite fiercely, I think. And there's just certain things that she brought with that. So, you know, we celebrated Christmas. We always had Pancake Day. Mom loves like baking scones and Victoria sponge and things like that. So like that was like in such stark contrast with like a very Bahraini upbringing. And it was interesting for me because I always felt Bahraini. And if anyone said, where are you from? I'd say Bahrain. And to this day, I still say Bahraini. But because I'm half of two worlds and London is now home, I've been here for 8 years, I kind of always say, okay, I'm Bahraini British. But I don't feel British, I don't feel English, which is odd to say, but I guess because I moved here in my late 20s, and, you know, I just didn't really have like a connection so much. Like we come here in the summer sometimes, but I was always kind of like, I don't think I'll live in England. Like, I don't like the weather.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's tricky for all. But I mean, if you come from the Gulf, then it's...
Yeah, it was a bit of an adjustment, you know. And I also didn't, like, connect. I still felt foreign. Like, I mean, I have, like, this weird international school kid accent, which is, like, a bit, like, American and British mashup, kind of. And I still feel that to this day. But so, you know, there are certain things that I kind of really embraced because of my mum.
Noor Murad speaking to me in the studio at Midori House. This is The Menu. Diners are as American a staple as the apple pie they serve. For many, they feel like a slice of the past, a throwback to bygone decades where their down-to-earth atmosphere and abundant portions made them an ever-popular everyday hangout. But are they still the hubs of community they once were? Poppy Damon heads to Little Purity in Brooklyn to investigate.
There's nothing bougie about it, there's nothing pretentious about the food. I grew up in New Jersey, so just to have like a diner feel, especially if you can sit at the counter, have an omelet, do all that kind of stuff, and it's not expensive, like it's super easy.
I'm in Park Slope, Brooklyn. I like to think of it as New York's answer to Hampstead in London, because both are upscale residential neighbourhoods known for their beautiful architecture and their large green spaces. Park Slope borders Prospect Park and is often made fun of for being a liberal haven. It's even famed for a supermarket where you have to work a shift to be able to shop there, the famous Park Slope Co-op, of which I've never successfully become a member. So I'm outside Little Purity Diner and there's a big, very colourful sign that says, welcome, please, absolutely, positivity, no strollers, scooters or bicycles, which was one of the rules. There's never anyone with a laptop or dogs either. It's very much a diner where you sit and you talk and you eat. And I'm here waiting outside to get a table. It's always this way. You gotta wait up to 45 minutes, but usually about 15. It's a quick turnaround. And we'll be meeting the family that run it. Nick Kolasakis and his sister Rini run this place, and I come here every weekend.
Thank you. Hey Nick, how are you?
Welcome. I think you're going to be smack in the middle, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, great. Just here?
Whichever one you want.
Thank
I think
you.
the worst one is the one in the middle, but
You think the egg
whatever.
at the end?
Sometimes I like being surrounded by people, you know?
It was the breakfast rush. Families and hipsters squashed into the quintessential diner booth with mirrors and family photos adorning the walls. Nick was running around taking orders and running the cash register, so I grabbed him as he came to give us our check. I stole just one moment of his time to find out more about how he and his sister Rini started this place.
My dad came here as an immigrant, had nothing,
Their father came from Greece.
and slowly but surely, you hold other jobs in other positions, and then you have your aspirations of what you really want to do when you get older. And when he had the chance to buy a restaurant, we bought it, and then put us all to work hard. I've never worked smart a day in my life. All I know is hard work. So. But it's paying off. It's paying off.
It's paying off because it's always busy here. People come for the breakfast classics like eggs, bacon, sausage. That's what my editor Charlie had.
Yeah, can I have 2 poached eggs and with bacon?
But there are some special items like challah French toast too.
Can we have challah French toast to share? Yeah, so good. It's my favourite.
When it comes, it's fluffy and crunchy in all the right places, and we drench it in maple syrup. Diners are definitely a staple here in New York. Since moving to the city, they've become my church, a regular Sunday morning activity. And once I found Little Purity, I became cautious of trying anywhere new. I learned that diners have a long history. In fact, in 1872, a horse-drawn lunch wagon parked outside newspaper offices in Providence, Rhode Island, and here the diner was born. Their heyday was after World War II, when gleaming prefab structures shaped like railway cars were shipped to every corner of the new interstate highway system. In New York City, the pioneers were Greek immigrants who have dominated the diner world for the last century. In 2017, New York Magazine lamented the decline of the diner, claiming that the city's 1,000 diners had halved in a generation. And COVID took its toll too. People lament the decline of the space for everyone to eat regardless of class or status. But here at Purity, the old Greek tradition and warmth lives on. In fact, Nick and Rini invited us to an event the very next day for something they like to call Meatball Monday. There, he said, we could have a proper chat.
Are you happy standing?
Do you want to do a booth or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah, okay, let's go in the booth.
Nick is a stander.
Oh, okay, let's stand. Because you're standing all the time. Okay, so could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Irini.
I'm Nick,
And where are we?
We're in Little Purity.
the best diner in Brooklyn.
I love it. So what is happening here tonight? Because it's something special.
Yes, it's Meatball Monday.
What is Meatball Monday?
It's a private, local social event for our besties, our best customers, our favorite customers, people that we've built relationships with along the way. And it's a way to give back and say thank you to them, because that's the reason why we're here and that's the reason why we love this place.
And you guys have a really interesting origin story. So tell me a little bit about your parents and how you ended up having this place.
Yeah, so my dad was actually in the furniture business originally. Always wanted to be in the restaurant industry, loved it. Started off as a dishwasher, once worked as a cook, didn't speak any English, and worked during a busy rush. Couldn't read the checks, didn't know how anybody wanted their burger cooked, made everything well done. By the end of it, he took his apron off. He's like, don't worry, I quit. He was like, he knew he messed up. He was like, I gotta practice. This is not good. But when Purity Diner was for sale on 7th and 7th, my dad took up the opportunity.
Unlike their dad's attempt in the kitchen, according to Rini, Nick is a natural.
Nick was made for this. If there's somebody who's made to be in this industry, and not even just this industry, it's here. I feel like when you go into a restaurant, there's a formality to it. You know, you can't talk to your person from across the room. You have to act a certain way. But here, it's just welcome to our living room. So Nick being here, it makes it what it is.
And what do you think, if you were explaining to someone who doesn't really know about diner culture, what sets apart a New York diner or Brooklyn diner, your diner, from other restaurants or breakfast places?
Simple word, the energy. It's not me. These are the words of other people, that there is an energy and a vibe that is living in this space, and that's what it is. Yeah, the food's great. The chefs are the best, and the cooks, the line cooks, my staff, my dishwashers, they've been with me for at least, all of them, at least 12 years and up to 21 years. Mm-hmm. And it just goes to show, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but the proof is in the pudding, and we love what we do, and that's why people respect us and say that.
You did mention something about a kind of secret knack to your meatballs. I just wonder if you could share with listeners.
Yeah, gluten-free. I actually don't know what I'm doing, but I take egg whites and I whip them into a meringue. 1 egg white per pound of meat, and you whip it with a whisk, no beater. No, don't cheat and use a hand mixer, and whip it for 3 minutes and 45 seconds, and that is exactly. You take that and then you fold it into the meat, be gentle with it, and I don't know, I think it provides this incredibly juicy meatball.
Families were beginning to gather, little kids and grandmas, music playing and a long table in the centre, with homemade bread and olive oil and cheese spread out. I grabbed a regular to find out what this was all about.
How often do you come here?
At least once a week as a family.
And what do you think makes it so special?
First of all, the food is consistently fabulous, which is important in any neighborhood restaurant. But it also just feels like an extension of home. It's like one of those third spaces, right? Because we know the owners, we know everyone who works here. I don't know, right? I grew up watching Cheers, and we all wanted to have that place where everyone knows our name, and this is it for us.
That's so nicely put. That's lovely. Thank you. And what about these Meatball Mondays? What do you think makes them even more special, and what do you think of the meatballs?
Oh, the meatballs are delicious. And my husband and Nick regularly trade food preparation and cooking tips. But this is just Nick going above and beyond. He doesn't need to do this. He's decided to not just be a business in the community, but an actual community member. And we've met a lot of other neighbors through Nick and Rainey, and they're coming to Meatball Mondays.
Yay. And I guess it's like you sort of associate it with a time gone by, and people often talk about it not being a thing anymore, but actually it's alive and well here in Park Slope.
It is. I like to describe Park Slope as Sesame Street. And yeah, I think if I got to write my own episode of Sesame Street, we'd have Nick. It used to be Mr. Hooper. Now there's Nick.
Eventually, my editor Charlie and I were handed a meatball to try for ourselves.
Okay, moment of truth. We're about to try the meatball. The meatball's about to happen. I'm going to cut it. It's got a beautiful parmesan top and a red sauce, and it's served on this lovely green porcelain plate. I'm chuckling because I'm so into having this meatball after a long day. Oh my god. It's unbelievable. It's so damn good. The wine's being opened in this third space that was so eloquently put, so we may leave a little purity to enjoy their Meatball Monday.
Poppy Damon there with that report. You're listening to The Menu. Now it's time for the week's top food and drink headlines. Here is Monocle's Francesca Jilks.
The industry body representing Japanese whiskey wants to make sure you know the difference between fake Japanese whiskey and the real deal. They have announced plans to register the spirit for geographical indication status and have launched a new logo for the drink to combat consumer confusion. These new measures are part of the Spirits and Liqueurs Makers Association's plans to differentiate Japanese-produced whiskey from bottles imported in bulk from other nations. A study has found that a Tanzanian diet is one of the healthiest in the world. The new research shows that adopting the eating habits of the Chaga people of Mount Kilimanjaro could have a positive impact on inflammation levels in the body. The cuisine of the North Tanzanian ethnic group is rich in fruits and vegetables and includes staples like cassava, plantains, and beans. And spice bag, the word for a popular Asian-Irish fusion dish, is among a spate of new words to be added to the Oxford English Dictionary. The OED describes the meal as a takeaway meal typically consisting of chips, shredded deep-fried chicken, fried onions, red and green peppers, chili peppers and jalapeno tossed in a bag with various spices. Its etymology has been credited to a Chinese restaurant in South Dublin called Sunflower. Those are the week's food and drink headlines. Now back to Chiara.
Thanks, Francesca. You're listening to The Menu. And finally, we're heading to Finland, where a long-forgotten drink is making a comeback. Sahti, a rich farmhouse ale, boasts a long history spanning at least 2,000 years. Farmers traditionally brewed it themselves, malting the grains, fermenting it with baking yeast, and incorporating forest ingredients like juniper. Though nearly extinct at one point, the craft of sahti making has luckily been preserved through generations. Now it's experiencing a renaissance as Finnish craft brewers dive into the country's brewing past. Our Helsinki correspondent Petri Burtsoff brings us this report.
Thousands of beer lovers flocked to Craft Beer Helsinki, one of the city's largest beer festivals. The kegs were full of popular craft beers such as New England double IPAs, sours, and imperial stouts. But a keen-eyed beer aficionado might have noticed a relative newcomer at these types of festivals, sahti. But when it comes to the Finnish beer culture, this local farmhouse ale is no newcomer. Farmers have been brewing it for at least 2 millennia, possibly longer. To make sense of it all, I met up with Juha Sinisalo, the president of the Finnish Beer Association, as well as Marjo-Kaisa Piironen, a sahti maker and educator specialized in this ancient beer. I began by asking Piironen how sahti is made.
When you have the traditional sahti, you are only allowed to use water, baker's yeast, so no beer yeast, and then grains. They can be malted, they can be rye, they can be oats, barley, mainly barley, of course. You filter everything through either juniper branches or straws. Perfect sahti for me is, to start with, it's still no bubbles. It's brownish. It has about 10 to 20% of rye, so it is very tasty. It's also a little bit sweet, a little bit like honey tasting in it, even though it has nothing to do with honey. And then it would be refreshing, easy to drink, even though it might be 10% alcohol. And also a little bit of juniper in the taste. And the smell comes from Finnish hops. That would be the best. And enjoyed among friends. Very, very close to sauna.
I had never tried sahti before, and next it was time to fix this. We picked one of the 3 sahtis on offer at the festival. This one brewed by the Helsinki-based Husky Brewing that specializes in traditional beer styles. Cheers.
Kippis.
So I get a hint in the scent, in the nose already, I get a hint of banana. Where does that come from? There's no banana in this beer, is there?
No banana, not allowed. That aroma comes from the yeast, baker's yeast.
Usually when you make a beer, you don't stop the fermentation. You let it go as long as it's fermenting. You let the yeast eat all the sugars that it can. In sahti, it's a bit different. You cool it down quite early, so that there's a lot of residual sweetness. So if you drink a really nice, fresh sahti, it has a lot of sweetness to it. This one, particularly, this is not like super fresh, so it's kind of a little bit drier already. So what you're tasting now is kind of a dry sahti, which might actually be easier for people who have never tried sahti before, because it resembles a bit more like, should I say, a regular beer. Without the carbonation. So it's a bit drier, but what you should find here is the banana aromas, which come from the baker's yeast. It's all the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and it's an ale yeast, technically, but it's a special type of yeast that you should be using for this beer, and that gives a lot of character. Sahti usually is not boiled, so when you don't boil it, you get a lot of residual proteins in the beer as well. Technically, it makes it a bit harder to store it for really long times, but for mouthfeel, it gives a lot of fullness. Of course, when you have sahti, it has to have over 6% alcohol to be called sahti at all, minimum. And you really rarely find these 6% sahtis. They would be considered quite weak sahtis. This one has 7.5%, but you don't really taste the alcohol because of the sweetness and the malt character. It's a really nice and balanced drink altogether.
The craft of sahti making has been passed from generation to generation, and there are only a handful of small breweries that make the drink today. However, sahti is making somewhat of a comeback as younger Finnish brewers study the origins of their beer culture, as Sinisalo explains.
I think craft brewing has done a lot of good. There have been these pockets where sahti has been brewed all these years. But now craft breweries have been going to look back to these old beer styles. For example, I look at Finnish breweries. We're turning to Belgium. We're looking at UK, and of course IPA is one of the classical examples how the old beer style got kind of new, kind of revitalized. And sahti is one of those things, I think, because instead of going far, we have to look near. And we find that we actually have our own beer style here as well, called sahti. And why should we go and brew some foreign, faraway, distant beer style when we have this already? So that's why you come here to this craft brewery festival here in Helsinki, and you'll find 3-4 different sahtis brewed by these quite modern breweries. And that's one of the most wonderful things I would say, that, and that's something that will definitely keep sahti going on for years to come.
For Monocle in Helsinki, I'm Petri Burtsoff.
Thanks, Petri. And that's all for this edition of The Menu. Remember that we are back with a new episode again on Friday at 2000 London time. That's at midday in San Francisco. Also, don't forget to tune to our spin-off show Food Neighborhoods for a tour of some of the world's tastiest destinations. I am Chiarimella. This program was produced by Monica Lillis and our sound engineer was Flynn Simons. Thanks for listening, and until next week.